The Ministry of Labour, Industrial Relations and Employment Creation, in consideration of the recommendations made by the Wages Commission, has set the national minimum wage for employees at 80 Namibian dollars per hour. Its focus is to contribute to the reduction of poverty and inequality while setting a fair wage standard. Joining us with more details on this and how it will impact the economy, we're joined by economist Lameck Odada. Mr. Odada, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
All right. How do you anticipate the new minimum wage, which is set at 80 Namibian dollars per hour? How do you think this will impact the overall poverty reduction in the country?
Yeah, well, of course, the poverty reduction is a bigger picture of what should happen in the country at large, but increasing the minimum wage, especially for the domestic workers and the farm workers, leads to increasing their purchasing power. That is, at least they'll have more money to be able to purchase things, and that depends on now the amount of disposable income that they will have, the amount of money that they're now able to use in spending. So we may not see a greater impact in terms of poverty reduction in general and also inequality, but at least we are saying that it should be able to lift some people out of the poverty line over some period in time.
Would you say it also perhaps contributes to the economic growth?
Yes, definitely, because economic growth depends on how much people are able to spend within an economy. So people who are spending less are now able to spend more, and definitely there would be a lot of money that is being pumped into the economy, given that people have got now more disposable income as opposed to what they had before the minimum wage was set.
All right. But what potential effects on employment do you foresee resulting from this new minimum wage? Do you think it will perhaps lead to job losses, or do you think it will encourage more employers to hire?
Yes, of course it depends on who is hiring who. Mm-hmm. You realize that if somebody who was paying less than $2,000 is now forced to spend approximately $3,000 a month on a domestic worker or on a farm worker, they may choose to say that I would rather reduce the number of farm workers so that I comply with the minimum wage. So definitely we may see some people who will be laid off, but the bigger picture should be, we should be able to try and see how we could also meet the government just to help other people get out of the poverty line.
All right. But how do you think this minimum wage affects the informal settlement? And also, what measures can be taken just to ensure that workers in this sector also benefit from fair wages?
Of course, the informal settlement, the problem with informal settlement in the first place is that they are not recognized. So people who are working within the informal settlement, when you are going to force them to set some minimum wage for people, they may decide and say, if anything I can do without these people. So the impact would be bigger there. And I think what we would see is that we would see very many people getting laid off from the informal sector. But the bigger picture would be if their informal sector could be recognized, regulated, then maybe a policy in those lines could help. But as it is right now, it's very challenging because these are people who are also struggling to make ends meet. So if you're also forcing them that there is a minimum amount that they need to pay somebody, they would opt to say, I would not need that person. I would rather find other means of production within what sector they are in.
All right. Would you say that also affects the small and medium enterprises?
Very much of the small and medium enterprises.
All right. How does Namibia's new minimum wage compare to those in other countries and regions? And also, what do you think we can learn from this experience?
If you see what's happening in South Africa, their minimum wage is set at about 28 Namibian dollars. For Botswana, is set at about 9 Namibian dollars. That's the region of about 7 pula. So we are somewhere in between South Africa and Botswana. But if you look at Namibia's dimension, Namibia is one of the most highly where inequality is most highly pronounced compared to South Africa and Botswana. Now, if you look at the population of South Africa versus the population of Namibia, now South African population is much bigger. So again, our population may play a bigger role that if just about 3 million people is what we have, and we're setting up a minimum wage at around 18, and you look at Botswana, that could have the same dynamics, but theirs is set at 9. So it makes us not be so way below, but also not high up there. So we are somewhere in the middle. Yes.
But what do you make of the $18?
Yeah, of course, it depends on who you are talking to, because I look at it this way, that
from an economist perspective, of course.
That translates to almost approximately $3,000 a month. So that's somebody who comes to work every day, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and then 4 weeks in a month. So still about 3,000. But look at it this way. If somebody's earning around $10,000 a month, and you want to spend 3,000 on your domestic worker or on your farm worker, that leaves you with 7,000, having not paid rent and other commitments. So I think I've got two ways to look at it, that yes, it is needed for the people that are being assisted, but also from the people that will be forced to pay this, it's going to be a little bit hard. But what do? We need to find ways of meeting each other halfway. So maybe we could think of not only the fact that we're going to be paying more, but the fact that we will be helping people to move out of the poverty line.
All right. Do you think one needs to be concerned about perhaps an inflation or high cost of living with the new minimum wage?
Of course, the problem that comes with extra money in the pocket is the reckless spending, or just prices being pushed up because of more demand. So definitely, but I don't think it would really lead to much of an inflation as such. But yeah, definitely we'll see some spending power increased with the newly set minimum wage.
All right. And how do you think policymakers should address some of these challenges?
Of course, it's not only on the policymaker side, it's also on the employers. But I think collective and very well-crafted consultation between the employers, the policymakers, and just looking at what would be the trend going forward. If the economy is growing, well, but why not? We could still even increase it to more than 18. It depends on so many factors, the macroeconomic factors. If there will be stagnation in growth in the economy, then how would people afford the $18? So it's got so many things, so many factors needs to be considered, and that's why proper consultation from both policymakers, employers, a collective effort to see what could be done going forward.
Yeah, but in the long term, do you perhaps want to see some of these adjustments?
Yes. Upwards.
Upwards. How many years approximately?
Maybe in the next 5 years, we could also have a look at it, since we are going to be introducing it gradually. So if we look at the economic growth, the trend, then we could see whether to adjust it, but definitely adjusting it upward, because you realize that as time goes by, the prices of things will increase. They are not going to go down. So definitely, we will still need an upward adjustment with time.
But you would say Namibia is on the right track?
Yes, definitely, compared to our neighbors.
All right. But how does raising the minimum wage contribute to reducing economic inequalities in the country?
Of course, that's what I said at the beginning. Economic inequality cannot only be looked at from the point of minimum wage. Economic inequality goes to so many things. What do we consider when we want to employ somebody? It even looks at what land do we have. So many things. If we are going to only look at the minimum wage to be the only factor to reduce economic inequality, that will not work. So we need a holistic approach to look at, because some of the requirements for employment are ridiculous. Somebody saying that you just came out of school but you need 5 years of experience, you are going to keep that person out of the job for a very long time. So that means that inequality is still not yet sorted out. So I wouldn't want to advise that we only look at minimum wage to be the source of reducing inequality, but so many other things should be brought into play before we focus on that.
Most definitely. Mr. Odada, any final remarks before we let you go?
Again, as I always say, this should be a collective effort. This is not only a government issue, it's an issue for everybody else. Let's support each other, let's work as a team, and then we could see prosperity within the Namibian nation.
All right. Well, thank you so much for talking to us this morning.
Thank you very much.
All right. Good Morning Namibia continues shortly. Don't go anywhere.